Betty Page was a pinup girl who became one of the most famous of the 1950s thanks to a series of BDSM photos that became incredibly controversial. Due to the controversy from those photos, Betty fled from the spotlight and remained a mysterious figure until the 90s, when she returned to the scene and basked in her cult following until her 2008 death. Many wondered what Betty was up to during the decades she went missing, and the truth behind Betty's disappearance is shocking. Join FactsVerse as we explore dark details that explain Betty Page's disappearance. Betty Page was born in Kingsport, Tennessee on April 22, 1923. She was the second child of 6 and grew up during the Great Depression. Her father was a mechanic who had an incredibly hard time making ends meet due to his minimal wages. When Betty Page was only 10, her parents divorced. In the wake of the divorce, they decided to give their children up for the time being. Betty and her siblings were sent to an orphanage for a year before their father came back for them. One might think the return of Betty's father would have been a good thing, but that didn't end up being so. During her teenage years, Betty's father molested her repeatedly. Betty would exhibit disturbing psychological issues later in life, and it's hard not to imagine this abuse at the hands of her father played a part in her later troubles. Still, Betty managed to keep things together on the surface during her teenage years. She was an excellent learner while attending Hume Fogg High School in Nashville, becoming homecoming queen, and even getting a scholarship. For her higher education, she headed off to George Peabody College and graduated in 1943. During her high school year, she had begun dating a fellow student named Billy Neal. Betty and Billy ended up getting married, with Billy becoming Betty's first of many husbands. After their marriage, the two headed to San Francisco. Like many beautiful young women, Betty had dreams of becoming a Hollywood star. Upon arriving in California, Betty worked as a secretary to support herself while modeling on the side. She found some minor success as a model, and this led to her being able to secure her first Hollywood screen test. But that didn't go very well. After the screen test was over, the producer performing the test asked Betty for a date, and she took a great deal of offense at the suggestion. That kind of thing might have been the norm back then, but Betty wasn't having any of it. She was reported to have knocked down the producer's advances a little bit too hard, destroying her hopes of finding a career in Hollywood. But she believed it was for the best. She had stood her ground. Betty and her first husband ended up divorcing in 1947, after which point the former aspiring Hollywood star decided to head back to New York City to find fame a different way. She was approached by a photographer named Jerry Tibbs, who asked if he could photograph her nude with some of his friends. Jerry was a cop by trade, but he had an amateur nude camera club with some fellow photography enthusiasts, and he believed Betty would be a perfect nude model. It was in 1949 that Tibbs approached Betty Page while she was walking along a beach on Long Island. After she agreed to be his nude model, a whole new world opened up for her. She realized it was her destiny to become a pinup girl, and she ended up being incredibly good at it. At that point, her career took off like a rocket. She could be seen in such small-time erotic publications as Flirt and Wink, but it wasn't until her 1955 appearance in Playboy that she became a legitimate star. She posed for a centerfold in the famous publication, and the issue containing it became one of the most popular issues ever. Playboy had only been around for a couple of years at that point, having been created in 1953. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already, and stick around for a lot more about Betty Page. Soon after Page's 1955 appearance in Playboy, the pinup girl caught the attention of an infamous photographer named Irving Klaw. Irving had developed a reputation in the industry for his then controversial BDSM photo shoots, which depicted his models tied up with various bits of rope and leather. While such a notion is still largely seen as taboo today, it was mind-blowing during the 50s. This is perhaps why Irving's photos, featuring the beautiful Betty Page, became such hot sellers. Irving had developed the novel idea of selling his photos via mail, and his photo shoot with Betty proved incredibly lucrative. The photos were a hit, with many thousands of copies sent all around the country. Sadly, the immense exposure from that photo shoot ended up coming around to bite both of them in the butt. A senator named Estes Kefauver saw them and subsequently took it upon himself to start an investigation to determine whether or not such photos were a detriment to society. The investigation turned up supposed proof that the photos had inspired the suicide of a man named Clarence Grimm's son. The investigation was in 1955 and came as a huge shock to Betty Page. When she found herself being accused of causing the suicide of a boy, she didn't know what to do. Irving Klaw found his business essentially destroyed, and Betty left the industry. Betty decided to leave New York after this controversy and moved to Florida. It was here that she had a religious awakening while attending church on New Year's Eve in 1957. With this, Betty pretty much disappeared for several decades. One might assume Betty had experienced a religious awakening and went on to live a life of peace, but this wasn't the case. Although she stayed out of erotic photography after her awakening and wasn't seen for decades, her time out of the spotlight was anything but peaceful. Instead, it was plagued with periods of severe mental illness and violent outbursts. She married for a second time in 1958 to a man named Armand Walterson. This marriage dissolved in 1963, and she married for the third time in 1967. Her third and final husband was a man named Harry Lear. They were married until 1972, and Betty started exhibiting some alarming behavioral tendencies during their marriage. Some of her strangest behaviors included running through a church retreat with a pistol and forcing her third husband and his children from a previous marriage to pray at knife point. Following these incidents, she spent a period of time confined to various institutions on suicide watch. Her third husband left her, and she never remarried. In the late 70s, Betty went to live in California with her brother. Sadly, her tendency for having violent outbursts continued. Betty attacked 2 different landladies with a knife on 2 occasions. After the second time, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and sentenced to another long period of confinement. Her second landlady attack had been incredibly severe, though the victim had thankfully survived. By reason of insanity, Betty was given a relatively light sentence. She served out her period of confinement in a hospital in California before her eventual release in 1992. The time in the hospital seemed to have done her some good, as she never again exhibited violent behaviors. The former pinup model had become a bit of a cult celebrity in the years since her disappearance. Famously, Penthouse magazine offered a reward of $1,000 to anyone who had any information about whether she was still alive. When Betty returned to the spotlight, she found out she had been the inspiration for a character in a comic book by the name of The Rocketeer, created by artist David Stevens. The comic followed a hero named The Rocketeer, whose girlfriend's name was Betty. The character was based on Betty Page's appearance, which entitled the resurfaced former pinup girl to some royalties. She survived off these royalties, as well as Social Security funds, until dying from a heart attack in 2008. She was 85. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know that famous pinup model Betty Page committed a number of violent crimes after disappearing from the spotlight? Let us know in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.